Okay, returning to the breaking news we mentioned at the top of the hour, 5 members of the Proud Boys, including its leader, Enrique Tarrio, and 4 of his lieutenants have been charged with seditious conspiracy. It is the most serious charge to be brought so far in the Justice Department's criminal investigation into the January 6th insurrection. From the announcement of today's charges, which come on top of previously filed charges against the Proud Boys, quote, Tarrio and his co-defendants, all of whom were leaders or members of the Ministry of Self-Defense, conspired to prevent, hinder, and delay the certification of the Electoral College vote and to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States. On January 6, 2021, the defendants directed, mobilized, and led members of the crowd onto the Capitol grounds and into the Capitol, leading to dismantling of metal barricades, destruction of property, breaching of the Capitol building, and assaults on law enforcement. During and after the attack, Tarrio and his co-defendants claimed credit for what had happened on social media and in an encrypted chat room. The Proud Boys are now the second extremist organization associated with the January 6th attack to face seditious conspiracy charges in the federal investigation into the insurrection. Joining our conversation, Harry Litman, former U.S. attorney, former deputy assistant attorney general, and host of the Talking Feds podcast. Claire and Carol are still here. Harry, what's your take on the significance of a second group being charged with seditious conspiracy today?
Yeah, so 2 things. First, this is the top of the charge, not just the most serious charge that has been brought, the most serious charge that will be brought. You think about the other charges out there, from trespass to monkeying around with a specific vote on January 6th. This is the actual plotting to overthrow the government of the United States. That's as serious as it gets, and this is really the Department of Justice going straight to the heart in the most consequential of charges. Second, it's a tough one and a rare one. The department has brought it a handful of times in the last 100 years. They've lost a couple because there's often a First Amendment defense here. So it shows, at least in this aspect of the investigation, the department being aggressive. And I'm sure this went at least to the Deputy Attorney General, if not Merrick Garland. And they're saying, look, this is what happened here, not just simply unruly behavior, but an attempt to overthrow the United States. We're going to charge it that way, even if it's risky. And so it's a gutsy, aggressive, but I think appropriate move for the most serious of offenders, and that's who these guys are.
So Tarrio wasn't in Washington that day. The indictment mentions encrypted chats. I want to come back and ask you to just really help us understand what a conspiracy looks like. But I want to first show what Trump thought of the Proud Boys, what he wanted them to do. Here he is with Chris Wallace.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
willing to do
specifically
that, but
do it?
Well,
go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
So, Harry, I played that because I remember some reporting in the New York Times that said that prosecutors were starting to ask some of these defendants questions about what they believed Donald Trump wanted them to do. And I wonder, in your view, if that soundbite could come to ensnare Donald Trump in their defenses.
It's really possible. Look, it's seditious conspiracy. That means an agreement among many people to that they all have the same goal, but they can do different things. They can have minor roles. That would be the most mind-blowing action ever, a criminal action ever in the history of the United States, seditious conspiracy of a former president. But what you say is really true. We do have the whole sort of development of what the connection between between Trump on the one hand and the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers on the other, perhaps mediated by the Bannons and Flynn's of the world. But look, we're talking conspiracy. Anyone who joins it, and that means they basically sign up for the goal and does anything, is potentially guilty. So that's absolutely something that is now on the table, even though it seems inconceivable that a former president would be charged with that. That's Benedict Arnold and worse kind of territory.
And shock always delays our ability to see Trump as clearly as we should. Carol Ledig, I want to ask you about the evidence that's been gathered on the other prong of the investigation, that's the 1-6 committee. It seems that one of the probes has always focused on foreknowledge of potential for violence. And but Cassidy Hutchinson, special assistant to President Donald J. Trump, and Mark Meadows, and a special assistant is sort of in most White Houses, the second or third most highest ranking official. What her testimony provides is knowledge that by the end of December, Mark Meadows knew there was a potential for violence on January 6th. And I wonder if you think this sort of congressional look at producing evidence that tries to prove or tell the story about how they all knew there was a potential for violence and these seditious conspiracy investigations at DOJ could ever intersect?
So, I'm going to take this question a little bit differently, if I can, Nicole, because I think that there are two tracks, one in which the Department of Justice is moving forward very aggressively, especially in recent days. There are people that complain that the DOJ did very little in the first year of Biden's tenure to really dig down into this, but recently very aggressive on going after people who used violent means in a conspiracy to block the transfer of power, block an official congressional proceeding, and ultimately try to send our democracy off the roller coaster rails. On the other hand, there is a conspiracy that can be argued that was nonviolent, but also was an agreement among a group of people in what I'll just call Team Trump. And there's significant evidence that's been produced by good reporting, witnesses who've come before the January 6th committee. And in that conspiracy, there wasn't the use of weapons. There was the use of the bully pulpit of the president to promote this big lie, to engage in a fraud that he knew was a fraud and had been told numerous times was not true, which was that the election had been rigged. That's not true. Argued that a series of swing states, dead people had voted. That's not true. That the results would have been different if the election had been fairly monitored. His attorney general told Donald Trump this was not true. That promotion of the big lie and the effort to use all of the levers of power that Trump had his hands on behind the green curtain is another kind of conspiracy, again, using a different kind of weaponry that wasn't violent. It's a trickier kind of conspiracy to charge, but in all sorts of corporate settings and in other public government and service settings, people have been charged with this conspiracy. And what I think a lot of critics of the Department of Justice would say is that this attorney general has not aggressively proceeded with that, while the January 6th committee obviously is honed in like a bee on the honeycomb on that exact issue. The nonviolent conspiracy to promote the big lie, to trick all of Trump's supporters, and to foment violence, ultimately, maximum pressure outside the Capitol on January 6th.
Well, and I guess, Claire, the only point when it's difficult to, if you're on the Trump sort of inner conspiracy ring, to suggest that they're separate, is when they turn violent on all of our TV screens, Trump does nothing. We now know he cheered the idea of hanging Mike Pence. He told the insurrectionists themselves to, quote, fight like hell or you wouldn't have a country. And after they had engaged in medieval hand-to-hand combat, in the words of the law enforcement officials, many of them were Republicans. They were people who prior to January 6th might have even been enthusiastic about the right. I don't know. We don't know. But they had no political association or affiliation until they were maimed by Trump supporters, who he sent to the Capitol and actually lied to by saying, I'll go with you. I'll go with you. We'll go here from the ellipse to the Capitol. So again, on this penchant for violence and starting to charge the violence, and then the Congressional Committee's interest in understanding how much they knew about the potential for violence. What are you watching for in either the DOJ probe or the congressional hearings?
Well, first, the President of the United States was asked to condemn white supremacists and violence associated with white supremacists, and specifically was asked about the Proud Boys. And he told them he didn't condemn them, he told them to stand by.
Stand by.
And
right.
then a few months later, he said, you know what, don't stand by anymore, come to Washington.
Yep.
Let's stop the peaceful transfer of power. He asked them to no longer stand by. That is a very important point of evidence. And if you look at the two conspiracies, you can put them in two buckets. One was violent activity that we all watched at our beloved Capitol on January 6th. And then the conspiracy that was Team Trump and pulling the levers to try to stop a legitimate election from having its natural course, which is the peaceful transfer of power. The interesting thing is, which conspiracy did more damage to the democracy?
Yeah.
The promotion of the big lie or the violence in the Capitol? I could argue that the more damaging conspiracy was one that continues this very day, where there are powerful people with money around the country supporting candidates who are doing nothing but saying Donald Trump's election was stolen. He is the president. I mean, we've got candidates running for the Senate in Missouri that are talking about reinstating him as president when they get elected to the Senate. It is nutty. And it is so damaging to a democracy because it undermines everybody's beliefs that elections count. And that, to me, is a really powerful argument that the nonviolent conspiracy is way more damaging than the violent one.